So let me stand back a second because I want to acknowledge, the first books you've written were with your dad, Don Tapscott, who I've known for years, and I think one of the beauties of the books you've co-written with him and also him with Microtrends is really that soothsayer aspect of, here's the landscape, but also here are the trends to watch and here are the potential perils that people will trip into. In terms of, so let me ask you, what have you learned from him in terms of how to look at the landscape and connect the dots? Because everybody tries to do it, but you've had the chance to have a front row seat in somebody who frankly is one of the best in the world at it. So give us some insights as to what you've, you're welcome, Don, but how do you look at the world differently, you think, having gotten his advice?
Well, I never thought that he and I would be working together. I graduated from university and I went into investment banking and had a career there for like 7 years. But it was in 2014 that I first learned about Bitcoin before the word Web3 or blockchain or any of these other things entered the vernacular. And I was actually on a ski trip with my dad in Quebec at Mont Tremblant, which is the big ski hill there. And over a steak dinner and some poutine, he asked me, what are you looking at these days? What are you interested in? And I told him about Bitcoin. And he said, that's really interesting because we're trying to do a project on Bitcoin. At the time, he was running this research initiative called the Global Solution Networks Program at the University of Toronto. Yeah. And he had nobody in his research team that had any financial services experience or any, sort of deep acumen about Bitcoin. This is at a time, by the way, when most people didn't know anything about Bitcoin, and I was certainly no expert. But I had an interest.
You could buy a burger for a Bitcoin, I think, at that point, right?
Maybe an expensive.
Maybe burger. Not. Maybe
it was actually like $150. It was like $150 a Bitcoin
when
I first looked at it. A couple of like Wagyu beef burgers or something like that. So he and I started collaborating on this report while I was still doing my day job. But the deeper I went, the more convinced I became that this was not just some new financial technology or new asset class. This was the start of something much bigger. I didn't know what yet, but it was enough to convince me to take a leap of faith. So yes, he and I together wrote a book called Blockchain Revolution. It came out in 2016. Better lucky than smart, they say. It was the timing was very good. It was right around when a lot of people in the business community and the financial community wanted to understand this thing, but didn't have a useful text to use. And so we kind of provided that book that everyone could use to get a footing in the market. Working with my dad has been eye-opening for a lot of reasons. We've often complemented each other. I mean, he has deep. He's a prolific author, obviously, but he also understands business management and theory extremely well. He's not actually as strong, and he would admit this, in the financial world, when it comes to, asset management or investment banking or capital markets and the structure of marketplaces. And that's something that I've been working on my whole life. So it was a highly synergistic collaboration. With the new book, with Web3, I'm looking to build on the work that we've done together. When we first wrote that book, the entire value of all digital assets in the world was like $10 billion, right? So if it was a publicly traded company, it would have been, as big as Under Armour, The Gap, relatively small business. Today, it's $1 trillion. And there are not just one or two types of digital assets like currencies, there are dozens of new types of assets. And so this has really become, to me, the most exciting economic frontier online. But what has surprised me a lot in the research is also how it's as much a cultural frontier as an economic frontier. And actually,
you mean about the decentralized innovation? Because it's not a Silicon Valley only, innovation anymore. Yeah. You're in Toronto. Montreal have been huge.
Yeah, that is certainly true. Toronto, for a period, was a leader in this area. Ethereum, which most people probably know, is the second largest blockchain platform. It's got a digital asset, native asset called Ether. It was started by a group of Canadians in Toronto. But this isn't even something that's just happening in the West per se. They used to say that Silicon Valley is like a tech Galapagos for the unique blend of talent and capital and government funding and resources that led to that peculiar species of founder that created all those big tech companies. An island of innovation, right, or an archipelago of innovation. Today is very different. Technology tools are way more distributed. Talent is way more distributed. Innovation is happening everywhere. It's not just in the U.S. or even the U.S., Canada, and places like it. I've traveled over the last 5 years to 40 countries. I've visited every continent except Antarctica. They haven't brought me there.
Not a lot
yet,
of AI.
but...
Probably is a lot of AI there actually with climate change, but I digress.
Well, who knows? I do know that there's like if not a Bitcoin ATM, there's some sort of thing happening at one of those like research facilities. But going to all these places is a reminder that a U.S.-centric view of the world is extremely limited when it comes to technology innovation, especially today. A lot of work has been done by a group called Chainalysis, which shows that adoption of a lot of Web3 tools, digital assets, and so forth is way more common in places like Thailand and Vietnam and Ukraine and Nigeria and Venezuela than it is in most
So they're
Western European.
leapfrogging. It's almost like